Anthropology. It's people. My name is Emily. I am a second semester student at ENMU studying digital archaeology and Mesoamerican archaeology. And these are my co-hosts. Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott. I study biological/forensic anthropology here at ENMU.
Lauren.
I'm Lauren. I study biocultural anthropology here at Eastern as a graduate student.
And Tim.
Hi, my name is Tim Van Zeeben, and I'm studying archaeology at Eastern New Mexico.
And this week we're talking about anthropology. It's in the media. Okay, so we're talking about social media, and basically, I don't know if you guys still have the notes up, but we're going to be talking kind of about how anthropology and archaeology is seen in modern media, not just on TV, but also on social media, which I honestly see so much on social media about archaeology, not so much anthropology, because I feel like people are still kind of figuring out what that is. The number of times that we get called paleontologists, I'm not surprised.
Yeah,
so we're just talking about how basically we're represented in the media, how we can become more accessible, because I've seen a lot of interest online. So really, we're going to be talking about how basically anthropologists and archaeologists are seen in the media. Like, I see a lot on archaeology out there. I wish there was more in anthropology, but I don't think a lot of people know what anthropologists do as of right now. I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, literally, this formal discussion.
That is a good question, because what would be an anthropology show? Like, how would you make one? If you were going to make a show that was just anthropology, wouldn't you have to be more specific?
It's so broad, because anthropology is the study of people, right? So when I first wanted to take an anthropology course in high school, I had no idea what it was. And my dad was like, you can't take that. It's ology. It's you're not going to do good in that class. Take an easier class. So when people hear ology, I feel like they automatically tune out because they're like, oh gosh. But it's basically the study of people. And within that, there's subfields, but it's the study of people.
Like, I think a really good example of non-scientific professionals who do that, like who have done shows like that, like Anthony Bourdain. Although he had a food show, he would always go to experience the culture. He'd take time to spend time with people, learn about the locations. It wasn't just, this is delicious food. This is what this place is. Another one is, I don't know if you guys have seen it on Netflix. It's called Travels with My Father by Jack Whitehall. It's this guy who's from England who takes his dad around the world. And his father is kind of like an unwilling participant. But they're experiencing like new cultures, new places. And like the dad actually comes away and talks about these cultures and how he's learned to appreciate aspects of cultures he never would have been introduced to if he hadn't gone to those locations. So like, I feel like that's a great way of seeing anthropology in the field without specifically calling it anthropology and without it being portrayed by actual like people who went to school to be anthropologists.
Basically, any travel show then is an anthropology show.
No, exactly. And it doesn't even have to be travel. It just any show that deals with different cultures within that, or different, even not even different cultures, just different ways to look at things, really.
That's outside of you as an individual.
Exactly.
I think one of the things when it comes to anthropology, it's once you actually start describing it to people, a lot of people connect to it really well. And I think it's because in a lot of ways, we actually do practice a lot of anthropology without ever even realizing it. Like a lot of the stuff we've been describing is cultural anthropology. Essentially, we're doing ethnographies, but, we just don't see it. Oh, I'm doing this in a formal way. Or when people really try to break down like language of certain things, that's the study of linguistics. Or like a really good example is J.R.R. Tolkien. Of like, he was pretty much a linguist, a linguist expert. Or you kind of see like when people question like, oh, how healthy were people back in the day? And the casual conversations behind that's biological right there. And then of course, like as Emily kind of alluded to earlier, there's also people are always fascinated about our past for whatever reasons. And a lot of the time, that's just archaeology, just straight up. So I think people talk about anthropology a lot. They just never realize, oh, there's actually an entire field of this.
And I feel like that expands into the next topic I wanted to bring up was trending topics on this. So you bring up like, our past and like looking into that. We can see this in archaeology on social media. It's actually something I really want to talk about was trending topics, especially this topic that's been floating around not just on public media, which is like major news outlets like the BBC, CNN has picked up stuff on this case I'm about to talk about, but we're seeing on social media, especially on TikTok. So I'm actually talking about the Cleopatra case, where there's this, she is, I guess we call her an armchair archaeologist because she actually didn't get her degree in archaeology, although she is a full-fledged archaeologist because she's doing work. Her name is Kathleen Martinez, and she has claimed that she may have found Cleopatra's tomb. Have you guys heard about this?
I definitely had, and Cleopatra said no man would ever find her tomb. And so this remark and how it's played throughout history, as a history major and my undergrad, it's just like
ironic.
Hey, it's kind of giving Eowyn from Lord of the Rings, where they like when she goes after. Yeah, it's like no man can kill me. I am no man.
I am no man.
But like this has gone viral. Like TikTok, it makes the rounds I would say even like every 3 months, which is pretty fast if you think about it. Where like other trends, it might take a couple years to come back or even a decade. Because I don't know if you guys remember the Harlem Shake from the mid 2010s, but that's back. But it took a decade to come back around. Well, so just the fact that this is coming back and she's making, that's my feeling exactly. The fact she made an update, I think it was in January, February of this year, saying that they've made more discoveries, people jump on it. It's not like a slow, like, oh, this is interesting. It's like people jump on it and it goes viral. These videos are having millions of views, and you have a variety of people, both laymen and experts, talking about it.
So I want to kind of set the scene because I don't know about this story in particular, but from the scant things I do know about Alexandria generally is that there was a part of the city where the palace was that's sunk, and it was generally thought, was she not buried there? Where was it thought that she was entombed? So what I am thinking, and Scott kind of alluded to this earlier, but is that there's knowledge that has been building up to where it is today. And so having not known anything about this story about finding Cleopatra's tomb, I have an idea that there was some idea about where it was previously.
So what I've learned, Tim, through my undergrad is that when she died, how she died, it's all been so secretive. Her slaves, her servants, when she said no man is to find me, since then it's been like Rome was dead set, Germany's been dead set, and since then it's never been.
What are they searching for when they look for this, and why does it matter in this situation?
So the big thing is, one, it's going to be that clickbait title, "No man will find my tomb." We don't even know if she for sure said that, obviously, but like it's become a clickbaity thing. And the fact that a woman is claiming she found it, that's one of the reasons why it generated a lot of attention on social media. The other thing is she referring to Kathleen Martinez, she came up with this idea that since Cleopatra is associated with the goddess of Isis, that more than likely her tomb would be located in basically the nearest temple dedicated to the goddess Isis near Alexandria. So, but the thing was, like, between the fact that there were massive earthquakes and tsunamis that basically took out the entire harbor and the city, like Alexandria from Cleopatra's time is underwater. So you need underwater archaeologists, you need people basically understand the layout of the area before all of this, but also Egypt and Egyptology has really kind of, they're really going back in and making sure they're local experts. So people who are from Egypt, who are basically educated in Egypt. Obviously we have people who are coming from outside schools who are Egyptian, but they went to school elsewhere and they're coming back in. Basically trying to keep everything on their home turf, because we know Egypt had this huge issue with looting and they're trying to get their artifacts back. So it's like the fact that she's not Egyptian. She's a Dominican lawyer, because she was a lawyer before she started doing this, comes in with a theory that she was able to actually, like, she found a site, she found a temple, and then as they've dug and they've actually discovered it's associated with ISIS, and then her most recent thing was they found tunnels and it might indicate there's a tomb there. So when this was basically broken to the main media, it went viral. And actually, one of my favorite shows, Expedition Unknown, featured this site a while ago. And they've gone back a couple of times to get updates on it. So the fact that this has ended up in main media, but it's definitely an active archaeological site, which you don't normally see. Like, I think it's fascinating.
This is one of these weird areas where when you say it's not popular or something, my initial reaction is, what? Why? Because this is a kind of thing that I'm drawn to, and especially it's interesting how those native Egyptian archaeologists have also become media personalities in their own right.
The whole thing is like they're viral. Exactly. But also, I also wanted to like point out with social media, because obviously in social media you have armchair archaeologists, people who are just interested in the field and stuff like that. But you also have people who know nothing about it, have never wanted to know anything about archaeology, and they're just touching on it because it pops up on their feed. A big trend I've seen is like, oh, we find like a tablet, or we find like a tomb, and like someone, or like there was like a sarcophagus that they drilled a pinhole into so they could put a pinhole camera into it, and everyone was like, oh, not after 2020. Oh, you're going to bring another 2020 on us. Oh, it's going to be the curse of the mummy. So I think like also seeing how people react to these massive events in archaeology and how they've become so viral, not just for the positives, like the discovery of the possible tomb of Cleopatra, but for discoveries that us as archaeologists like, oh, this is so cool. But then like people who know nothing about the site and aren't going to look past like the viral video or like, oh, it's a cursed object. So like, I think that's a really interesting phenomena that we're seeing. And like, as somebody who does enjoy their social media time, coming across that can be frustrating sometimes as an archaeologist or someone who's learning to be an archaeologist. How do you guys feel?
I'm curious, as far as archaeology goes, is it only Egyptology and like Rome, the things that people think about, or does other archaeology get people excited?
There is other archaeology that people get excited about. Actually, that bridges well into something else I want to talk about, moving more into the idea that not just on social media, because I do want to talk more about social media because there's so much on that, but I first want to touch on how we do see archaeology in different places. So viral shows, so like Expedition Unknown, like I mentioned that one before. Like I said, like this show is massive. I love watching it. I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to check it out, but they cover everything from, like, they cover sites all over the world. Recently, the show has been covering a lot of World War II sites and underwater archaeology, which I feel is great because it's a side of archaeology people don't see normally, especially underwater archaeology, because it is so tricky.
Plus, I remember this one episode that really stands out to me. I believe he went to Ecuador or a South American country, and a lot of the footage is not necessarily the archaeology stuff. It's him in the city interacting with the local people who know the archaeology that he is going to hook up with. So it's a lot of giving them the credit, and he is there for the ride, it seems like.
Yeah, and like Josh Gates is, so he has, I believe, his bachelor's in archaeology. So he is an archaeologist in like study. He did study archaeology. He's participated on digs. He's done some research. So like, I think it's a great example of somebody who's been trained as an anthropologist, but he was also trained, he is a trained actor and thespian. He has worked in, like, I hate to call it Hollywood because it's not just Hollywood now, but he's worked in Hollywood for a while. It's a great example of a show where you have somebody who has studied in our field, knows like the theoretical sides, knows the scientific side, but he also is trained to present a much more personable, humanistic version of archaeology. I think another good example of this, not to cut you off, Tim, is Curse of Oak Island. And then I know you guys mentioned when we were talking before this episode, I know you guys mentioned there was 2 other shows that I'm not super familiar with, Ice Age America and Unearthed.
Ice Age America, it was during winter break after my first semester here at Eastern for a graduate student. And my brother, actually, who has just a high school diploma, he was like, you want to watch this cool show? I started it, but like, I think you would really like it. And it's called Ice Age America. And I sat down and watched it with him. And all the things we've been talking about during our hunting and gathering course last semester, it highlighted over it. And it's all about all these archaeologists who are working currently in North America. And a lot of them right now are in South America, and they're finding sites that are predating Blackwater Draw, which is the site here surrounding Eastern New Mexico and our department. And my brother has called me like twice since watching that with him, and he's like, Lauren, like they're trying to debunk like your school, like Blackwater Draw. They're trying to debunk that site. And I'm like trying to explain to Robert, like, they're not trying to debunk it, but the evidence and the other sites that are coming up are prior to that. And so it's showing that this isn't the oldest site here in North America. And I feel like social media and these shows are really helping integrating people that aren't in this field. And yes, they might have views, or not even views, but be saying things on social media that aren't true, but it's still getting other people and themselves more knowledgeable about this, and they're researching it more. And I feel like we've all been there, and we've all said things in classes or in our lives that aren't true, but we keep researching it and we understand, like, oh, like, so for social media, I feel like shows like this are great.
Another big social media sensation that has a New Mexico connection was the footprints at White Sands, and how that was also could be redefining a timeline.
Yeah. And that movie highlighted that site as well.
I think, though, a thought that has been coming in my head is like, okay, why are these shows been successful? How do you make them successful? And while I think the archaeology of it, like having someone who's trained in, who actually understands everything going on, that's a pretty critical thing. But really, is this person media savvy? Can they tell a good narrative? Can they bring in the audience for it? Because a good example is that Lauren was bringing up. They debunked, oh, are you debunking? Blackwater Draw has been debunked. Except if you actually talk to archaeology, you actually talk to the gentleman who runs Blackwater Draw. His name is Dr. Brendan Asher. You talk to him, and he'll say, like, and he's like, yeah, no, there are sites much older than Blackwater Draw. We've known about this for a while. It's not invalidating that we're finding older and older sites. We knew this was probably going to happen, but we were just waiting for the evidence to come out. White Sands is a good example. The footprints discovered in White Sands don't, they now, it's more proof that we've had people here in the Americas, dating to 20 to 23,000 years ago. Except the thing is, archaeologists kind of that was already our guesstimates, is when we first started seeing humans, is within that time range. And that is one thing that a lot of these shows will notice. If you ever noticed a lot of these shows, they develop a narrative, and a powerful one at that, and that's what kind of like sucks you in. And whether it's trying to uncover something new, like Cleopatra's tomb, right? Oh, the narrative of a woman discovering Cleopatra's tomb, you could not write that script any better, right? Or, oh, we're trying to debunk the archaeologists, right? That's also a big thing that you see all the time that these shows will use. We're debunking we're confusing the experts. We're debunking the experts. It's us battling against the experts. And whatever it is, we're going up against the experts because that, almost brings a bad boy vibe to whatever we're talking about. And we've kind of always had that narrative of like, oh, well, the experts say this, but our, peppy protagonist says, no, they're wrong. They're actually something out there. Like Atlantis is a really good example of no one, Milo, no one believes Milo, but he's out there to prove him wrong. There's one guy that believes in him and he funds his whole expedition. And that is such a trope in our media of the one person going to prove all the experts wrong. In the part of it that unfortunately where a lot of archaeology just doesn't make for that good of a narrative is when you actually probably talk to a lot of archaeologists, they'll say, oh yeah, they're very open to the possibility of, oh, well, there's definitely sites older than Clovis, probably. We just haven't found it yet. Or, oh, I'm sure there could be something like that out there, but we haven't discovered it. Now that breaks that idea of like, but I thought experts were claiming this, and I was like, no. We don't have the evidence, but we're not shooting it down.
Honestly, jumping off from shows into social media, I am a TikTok addict. I will admit it. I will be the first to admit it. Hi, my name is Emily, and I am a TikTok addict.
Hi, Emily.
Tell me how much you love TikTok videos, Emily.
Oh,
I love it much.
And then Fortnite dances.
So much. But it's like, I actually like, so when we first started talking about this podcast, this was one of the first episodes that I was like, I need to do this episode. We need to talk about this because some of my favorite TikTok creators, they are just normal everyday people who love history and archaeology. No, I'm wanting to talk about it because like everyday people, that's the one thing, like when the four of us got together to talk about this podcast, the one thing we really want to do is make sure that it was accessible. And like we admit, we're the people in class that we can't shut up. We don't shut up. We sit here and we talk and we get esoteric.
Emily, we do not do that all the time.
Yeah, no. But the thing is, it's like, we don't think about it because we are sitting there in a classroom actively learning about theory. We're actively learning how to be anthropologists and archaeologists and work in the field as professionals. So when we sit here and talk, honestly, like I have friends and family who will sit there and their eyes will glaze over, not in like a bad way. It's just, it's like if I go and talk to my mom who's a nurse and she starts talking to me in medical jargon that I don't understand, I do the same thing. It's like, can you explain that? Like I'm a 5-year-old. And that's not to be like rude. It's just like, I just don't understand. And I admit, like sometimes we get off on tangents like that too. But that's why I love that there are creators out there who, although they did not train to work in our field, they love our field so much that they actually have careers on social media based on spreading history and archaeological news. So, actually, one of my favorites, she just got back from a hiatus. Her name is Tanny Caesar. She's based out of Australia, and she's known for her tagline, "Stop what you're doing. Something's happened in archaeology." And she'll sit there and she will rattle off the latest in archaeological news, like something that's popped up on her news feed or her RSS feed, which I think is fantastic. She does such good research. She has not been shy about the fact that she's a nerd, and she'll sit there and like actually go through and like read the articles. She'll go and try and find scholarly articles on it. Like she does her research as an armchair archaeologist. And another person like that who isn't more archaeology, he does a lot more history, is Valenti Videos. He is the one who goes, "But you don't understand.
But you don't understand."
Exactly. And he presents these different historical things or archaeological things in such an accessible, fun way. He went viral. This man has 2.7 million followers on TikTok.
And like, fast. He did it so fast.
He has more followers on TikTok than Josh Gates from Expedition Unknown. Josh Gates has 1.4 million.
And why is that?
So Josh Gates doesn't post regularly, which we understand. The man's traveling the world. He has a life outside of everything. You can't share everything you're actively doing when you're working for a big network TV show. Versus like Tanny Caesar, who her entire job is to be a social media influencer. She also has other jobs, but like that was one of her main jobs. Valenti Videos, he's eventually built up to being just a social media influencer. And they post like 5, 6, 7 times a day. That is their entire thing. but also I think it's a lot more accessible. So one that, and here's like a good example between that. So I've told you about Tanny Caesar. I've told you about Valenti videos. Like I said, they're normal people. They're just, they just love it. I've actually found, and I just found these people because the algorithm was algorithming. And one of them, his name is David Ian Howe. He does archaeology, a lot of plains archaeology. He's on TikTok with 207.9 thousand followers. That's not a number to shy away from. That's a big number of followers. Or another one, there's two, it's Diggin' Doctor. He's based out of the Near East, and obviously he can't say where his site is. He has 19.2K thousand followers, and he actually shows active sites. But again, his content isn't really pushed towards like the modern audience, like main audience. Both of them really focus on a lot more scholarly material, kind of like what we do. And I feel like it alienates a huge majority of social media viewers.
I was just going to say that. No, I was just going to say that because I feel like all my friends know I'm a history nerd. You know, we'll be hanging out and someone will say something about history and everybody will be like, don't start with Lauren. She's going to start on her tangents. And they'll send me all these TikTok videos. And the guy that says, but wait, what is that slogan he says, Emily?
But you don't understand.
But you don't understand. I've seen maybe like one of his videos and the rest all my friends send to me. And it's because I feel like I have seen so many history videos. I've liked so many history videos that I'm getting these scholarly history videos now. But my friends who haven't seen a lot, they're getting his. You know what I mean? And so if you're not a regular archaeological TikToker, then you're getting the more accessible knowledge. And the hashtags and everything. The algorithm really knows what you're into and what you're not into. And it's a breeding ground, really. It's like once you start liking his videos, then you're going to start getting all these history videos. And it just blossoms, and it's really, I don't know, like, fascinating.
You also just said your friends don't like you talking about history. So where is that disconnect?
The disconnect is when we're out having fun and I'm like, oh, did you know uranium built the atomic bomb and the taxpayer dollars are still no. They're like, okay, Lauren. But when you see a video and it's like, but you don't understand. The Japanese didn't, and his next sentence after that, it's like capturing. It's like the Cleopatra, the no man is gonna find my tomb. A woman found in our Cleopatra's. It's that next slogan, and social media today is allowing people to access that. Like, how many other women archaeologists throughout history almost or found a clue to Cleopatra's tomb? Probably a lot, but we don't know. We don't know about it.
I think why I think you can see, well, why don't we see some of these, the obviously more educated individuals, by all means, they should be extra. Why aren't they bigger? And I think it's something you alluded to, Lauren, is that next slogan. I have the next slogan. I have slogan I'm known for, tagline. That probably is only a 3 or 4 second thing. Emily, though, how important is those first 5 seconds of a video?
So Scott, definitely with social media, because the average attention span has dropped. And it used to be 3 minutes, dropped about 2 minutes during the pandemic. And now they say the average attention span for somebody on social media is between 10 to 15 seconds. And I think that's even lower now. We don't do long form content. People don't look at long form content like that. Like they might, like if they're at work, I hope some of you guys are sitting there at work or you guys are studying or something like that. And you're listening to us and that'd be awesome. But I acknowledge like probably the only time you guys are going to see like half of this is like when you're on TikTok and you're scrolling through and you might see some sound bites from us, which is fine. I get it. Attention span has dropped. And that means the first 2 to 5 seconds of a video are the most important. And it's not even always a tagline. It's just like you need to say something and you need to be presenting yourself in a way that's catchy and interesting. And honestly, the algorithm, so I know a bit about AI and AI algorithms, which are used in social media. They're different. They're all proprietary and they all change constantly because what we are looking for changes constantly. It's kind of along the same lines of thinking of people who design casinos. We want the flashy lights, we want the moving things, we want something that's going to produce dopamine. Sorry to go a little bit intense in there scientific wise, but it's how social media works. It's literally there for the instant gratification and dopamine rush.
Okay.
So it's definitely like within the first like 2 to 5 seconds, preferably 2 seconds.
So there is the question of why don't we see more of these professional archaeologists? Why aren't they blowing up on social media like we see with others? And I think some of that has to deal with the fact of you're either like, just to get to the point of your doctorate, is you're talking 4 years at undergrad. Which nowadays is incredibly optimistic. 2 years of getting your master's, also pretty optimistic.
Minimum, yeah.
And then an additional 4 years just to get to your doctorate. So we're just, now mind you, to work in the field, do you need a doctorate? No, there is field experience that you can have on top of that. But that's also not going to be a shortcut either. It's going to take you that many years to get to that point where you can be a subject matter expert. And it's perfectly reasonable that you also didn't learn how to do social media things during that time because you were focused on so many other things. For 10 years, you probably had to dedicate your life just to that. And probably not, learning how to catch somebody in the first 2 to 5 seconds of a TikTok video. It's a very rare skill to be able to do both.
Assuming you have access to both.
Sure.
Or one or the other.
Exactly. And like, I admit, I personally am very grateful for the background I have. Like, I have about a decade of experience working in marketing. So I do have that insight while also being able to go and get my master's. So like, I think that's why when I look at this, I like to look for solution-driven results. I think that's a great way of framing the next step. I would actually like to highlight one of my favorite TikTokers. So her name is Dr. Amy Boyington. So she is based out of the UK and she makes history content. So Dr. Boyington, or is really History with Amy. So I hope she doesn't mind me calling her Amy because she does refer to herself by her first name on social media. She is just shy last time I checked. So this was about a week ago and we're filming end of April 2024. She was at 962.8 thousand TikTok followers, but her videos have millions of views, millions. So she has a really high conversion rate for views to follows. Her content is incredibly engaging. She does a lot of storytelling. So some of her most popular videos are on the Tudor family. She has a lot on Henry VIII and like about like different historical events and individuals surrounding that. She first went viral actually for covering different royal women throughout history who you might not have heard about, which I personally, that's when I started following her, is when she started that series, because there were so many women and she specializes in European history. So there were different royal women from all over Europe, from like the Middle Ages up through like modern days, and like people that you would have never heard of if she hadn't highlighted them. And her content is so engaging. So she does it in a storytelling way. She takes them through their entire life and lets you get to know the person. And I understand why that is such a successful platform. Not saying other platforms are bad in any way, shape, or form, because I enjoy watching all of my fun archaeology professors on TikTok. But I understand why a larger audience isn't picking up on that too, from a marketing perspective, because you have a lot of people who are sitting there and like we talk about the 5-second rule. If you don't have your audience within that first 2 to 5 seconds, they're going to skip your video. That is so normal. It's kind of like when you look on the Instagram algorithm with your stories and you can see how people skip through your stories. Your story is 5 seconds. People usually skip through. A skip through rate's like over 90%. So those first 3 to 5 seconds, and honestly it's like 2 to 5 seconds, are the most important in your social media video. And she has that down to a science. She introduces the character and she always says something like, oh, was Queen Elizabeth I actually wearing a wig? Like, you hear that, you're like, wait, was she? Like, you're grabbed. You're like, wait, what? Really? Or like, she'll be like, oh, did Henry VIII actually only have X number of wives? Like, she's really good on grabbing you within those first couple of seconds. And I do have to admit, there's a couple of archaeologists that I follow. I see some videos doing very well and some not. Like, there's another doctor on TikTok who's showing digs, like an active dig, which is so cool. It's in the Near East. And he had a few go viral. And with those, it was like him actively showing like, hey, like, this is how the structure works. He was walking people through the site. It went viral. But then, like, he does other things like following TikTok trends and they don't go viral. And, like, that all does have to do with algorithm. We know the algorithm is not fair to people. There's this thing called shadow banning that we don't need to get into, but it exists. And basically, it means your videos won't do better. But you can look at the type of content people are making and be like, okay, like, this person's successful because of X, Y, and Z, like their storytelling, the way they present something, blah, blah, blah. But I think it really does come down to, like we talked earlier, those first 2 to 3 seconds. I say that will give you guys a long-winded explanation on social media. But also it comes down to what the algorithm wants people to see. And that's a hard thing in our field, because as archaeologists, we can't say everything. And as anthropologists, you can't say everything you're working on. Like, you can't. Like, you know, it's science. Like, you know, like, I feel like we'll have a lot of professionals watching this, and they'll understand that you can't release stuff that you're working on, that you're working on getting published, until it's published. Like, you just can't. And that's hard in a social media aspect. But I think that also is where we get, like, where we can actually see in our field why the people spreading news are the people who aren't actively working in the field. Because when you're working in the field, it's like, well, what can I share?
Well, not only that, that's what's interesting about History with Amy, and like the topics that they're bringing to the conversation are generally topics which have not really had a lot of play before. And specifically, I know with her, I was just on her website earlier, and one of her little blurbs was Empress Sisi from Austria-Hungary, which I don't know if it was from her who I learned about Empress Sisi, but somewhere I heard about it, and it was another woman talking about her. So these are voices that are able to get into the narrative in new ways that they were probably left out of before.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a big boon, I think, in social media, is like underrepresented voices have the opportunity to be represented. And like, I feel like within our fields, it is relatively underrepresented, but I'm wondering how much of that is algorithm and how much of that is a learning curve.
So expertise in social media is very difficult unless you're targeting other expertise. And within that, you're still going to get feedback. So yes, I've been watching history videos on TikTok, and I'll have to put my phone down and not like them and tell them to stop putting this on my feed, because sometimes it's just frustrating because it's not the whole history. Like when I talk about history, there's multiple histories. And as a cultural anthropologist, I'm not an archaeologist, so a different spin on this is watching people traveling on TikTok or watching people do cultural videos that aren't even realizing they're doing cultural videos. It's sometimes frustrating because they're not getting the whole perspective within that culture. They're traveling to different areas within Mexico or dealing with different, like even Hawaii, people traveling to Hawaii, and they're like, I'm going to move to Hawaii. I'm going to move to Hawaii. And they don't really understand the cultural significance of what that means to move to an island that's been fighting through colonization. And they're like, oh, colonization is a thing of the past, but is it? What's globalization? Like, it's just very different. And through a cultural anthropologist, it's frustrating sometimes. I don't like being on TikTok if it's educational wise, because I've been at school all day. So when I'm hearing people talk about things and I'm like, And I guess that's just the field in a way, though. You're going to read articles and you're just like, ugh. It's like when Dr. Lynch brings up Binford. I tune out.
It's all Binford's fault. Actually, oh, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I was just going to say, it goes to what Scott was talking about earlier, how it takes information to get to a certain place in your career, if that's the path that you want to go, that a gulf grows between you and everybody else. And everybody else isn't taking the time to do the same thing you're doing, so they're not on that same level. And that's why the background in marketing, where you have to realize that you need to shift meaning, shift ideas, shift words in every instance to make it approachable to other people. That really comes in handy, that they just don't teach you in grad school.
Lauren, did you have something?
I think that's the biggest thing with social media is the intent. It's not the marketing. Obviously, it's the marketing, but it's why you're making these videos. And the big reason why people are making these videos is, oh, I know history and I want to be famous, so I'm going to make videos on something I know to become more popular and to become more noticed and this and that. This is coming from a cultural anthropologist, guys, but it's the purpose you put behind it, and it's the attraction, right? For us, it's more so how are we going to use our expertise to further our knowledge in our indigenous tribe that we're studying, or this or that, and how can we better that? And for social media, it's, in my opinion, it's how can I air this information out, but also receive credit for that?
You know, social media is relative, just like everything else is. Not everyone is out there to get famous. There's a lot, but not everyone's out there to get famous. And I definitely saw my share of people go, oh, I'm going to go to these cultural sites or these cultural events. They're filming themselves at them, but it's not appropriate the way that they're doing that and like the way they're presenting things. And I feel like until semi-recently, people haven't even realized that sometimes when you're coming into like, you know, a new area of expertise, like whether it be archaeology, anthropology, anything, like sometimes you need to have the descendant communities represent themselves on these platforms too. So like, I feel like it becomes a shaky ground there, but that actually really lands us in kind of talking a little bit about our theme for the season, which is praxis, which as like a very vague and simple definition is putting thought into action. And we're seeing a praxis in social media, like different creators are putting thoughts, actual thoughts, like different concepts, different ideas, different sites, different studies into action by making a video about it and sharing. That is a praxis. So I want to talk about, like, just kind of wrap everything up. All four of us are focusing on different realms of the anthropological and archaeological communities. So that means we're all going to approach this whole concept of social media in a different way. How would you approach your content and what you would consider an ethical way, or in a way that it'd be more accessible and interesting to that community? Because I feel like the only way that we can combat misinformation is to put the proper information out there and also be advocates for like what is basically peer reviewed. Like we talked about this podcast as like hopefully a means of that, but we have to acknowledge short form social media is like it's king right now. So how would you approach that? Thank you again to everyone who joined us for this episode of Anthropology. It's People, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.